Welcome back to The Truth Hurts, where we expose corrupt politicians and the lying corporate media. I'm Jake Duesenberg, your host, broadcasting live from Roseville, Minnesota, in the belly of the beast, the liberal zombie apocalypse of Minneapolis and St. Paul, discussing some important things today. You won't hear this anywhere else. Meg and Jesse, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, we got some good stuff lined up. We'll be discussing the Minnesota House, the Democrat obstructionists, and the Republicans who are just sitting on their hands, twiddling their thumbs. We'll be discussing exactly what's going on within the Minnesota House of Representatives. We'll be discussing child care CCAP fraud. We'll be discussing a COVID admission by Pierce Morgan, and then we will be getting into our post show. See, we got Bill Dangsvin, Tucker91 in the comments, so make sure to leave a Rumble rant if you want to make sure that your comment is read today.
Yep, if you want to interrupt at the same time, just hit that Rumble Rant button and we'll go right to your comment. Running the dials as always, Mr. Deep State himself, Dawson. How you doing there, Dawson?
I'm good. We're cooking. We're cooking day. Let's just say that.
Well, you put together a pretty interesting video last minute, so well done, by the way. I think people will appreciate that.
Ultimately easy. The only problem is it took longer to export than it took to make. So.
Tech problems, right?
Love it. Always.
This show is brought to you by Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, give my good friend Warren Wessel a call at 612-419-7453. He's not only a great real estate agent and a friend, he thinks like you and me and sings in my church's choir, which is just fantastic. If you're buying a home, give the good guys at John Galt Mortgage a chance at financing that home. Go to johngaltmortgage.com or look them up on Facebook or X. Top-notch meme game, top-notch beliefs in liberty. What?
I have one more quick thing. If you're watching on Locals, can you comment or something to let us know? Because I keep on getting an error saying something went wrong, but everything's fine from my end. So let me know what's going on.
All right, yeah, monitor that. Also, we're brought to you by Alpine Chemtree in St. Cloud, Minnesota, a great city that needs to be saved. They got numbnutses up there representing them, Eric Putnam and Dan Wogelman, or we call him Sylvester the Cat. Oh, K-Wall for Life is in the comment section. Cheers to you, K-Wall for Life. Okay, let's get started. Dawson, everyone knows at this point the Democrats refuse to show up to the Capitol. They're holding up a quorum. The Supreme Court had a ridiculous ruling saying that a quorum is 68 members. They equated an empty seat to a member. It's just that's how radical these people are. Mm-hmm. That's why Mark Dayton and Tim Walz liked them. Okay? So that's where we're at right now. Republicans should have showed up Monday and fought back against it. We'll get into the list of things they should be doing, although I think they really are down to kind of one option at this point because the first two they kind of blew the chance, an opportunity. But here's why we're so upset with what they're doing, okay? And I don't think you're going to hear anyone else in media talk about this stuff because I think this is an opportunity for unity, right? The Democrats are clearly in the wrong, right? There's nothing about what they're doing that's right. However, I'm not going to sit here and make the argument, hey, Democrats, show back up to work. I don't want them at the Capitol. I vote against them going to the Capitol, right?
Agreed.
They've chose not to come to the Capitol. Good, stay at home. Probably shouldn't get paid. I don't know. Can we pay them to never come to the Capitol? That might be worth it. Save us a ton of money. So anyhow, I'm not going to say that. I don't want these guys. But that's what the Republicans are doing. They're just, it seems to me, just trying to win the day's talking points. Okay? Which they already won. No one believes the Democrats are in the right, except for the far left. No one believes the Democrats are doing the right thing. Common sense people that have heard the story, I talk to these people all the time. They say, I can't believe those Democrats are getting a paycheck. That literally, no one's shocked by that. That's a big issue with people, that they're not showing up and they're still getting a paycheck, all right? The point I'm going to try to make, and I think Meg and Jesse's going to try to make today, is what is the goal of just winning the day's talking points? Aren't you going to do something? You have a majority, 67 to 66. Do something! My God, can you imagine if Donald Trump got in office and he did nothing? Like, that was my fear. That was my reluctance in voting for Trump because he failed on so many things the first term. He didn't stand up. He pointed the wrong people. And now I'm like, throw me that MAGA hat because look at Trump. He's actually leading. So let's show you the montage. Now, mind you, the Republicans conceded right off the bat and allowed Secretary of State Steve Simon to gavel them in every day. This is Monday, right? Gavel them every day. The Supreme Court did not weigh in on that, right? They just assumed, well, we got to go back to him because we don't have a speaker. And he's going to unilaterally adjourn them every day. And by the way, an adjournment is a motion from a member on the floor. It's not a unilateral decree by the presiding officer, who shouldn't be the presiding officer. This is nonsense. This is a montage of all 3 days that Republicans have done the same thing. Watch. They're just going to stand and do nothing. Except for one, by the way.
Quorum is not present. The House is adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. The House will adjourn until 3:30 p.m. Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Clerk will close the roll. There being no quorum under the Minnesota Constitution, the House is adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, January 30th, 2025.
I hope that was it, because
That wasn't even close to it, Dawson.
How many videos did you want?
All 3 days.
That was 3.
Yeah, I don't know. You missed the first one.
Did I miss?
But yeah, no, I did have Simon gaveling that first day too. So.
Oh, I didn't have my headset on.
Yeah.
Did it really? Well, I suppose
you
it's.
didn't have your headset on, and you're claiming my.
Hold on,
videos
go back to that real quick.
Oh my gosh! All right.
It was really that fluid? It looked like it was a continuous video.
Thank
Go
you.
back to
I
this.
appreciate it.
I didn't even know.
Okay.
Did he change suits?
Here, let's.
What's wrong?
There's no audio right now. Hold on. Sorry, I turned it down.
Tuesday, January 28th, 2025.
Yeah, the 28th, then the 29th.
I don't know
and
if
the
it's in
30th.
order though.
The House will adjourn until
Oh,
3:30 p.m. Wednesday.
That was so
January
fluid.
29th,
I didn't even notice.
2025.
Well, there you go, Dawson. Congrats. I got so busy right before the show, and then I was like, oh, I forgot to tell Dawson to put the montage together. I never reviewed it. So, yeah, go ahead, Brad Ganser, show prep. I get it. All right, so you see, all 3 days, well, that didn't have the pop. I was open. All 3 days, they just allow him to unilaterally gavel them out. And that's never something that happens. When you watch a floor session, you don't watch the speaker go, we're adjourned. You entertain a motion from the floor. In fact, it always goes this way. The majority leader goes, I make a motion that when we adjourn to specific time and date, right? And then all in favor say aye, aye. And then, Madam Speaker, I make a motion that we do now adjourn. And then they do it. And you don't debate an adjournment, okay? But what you definitely don't do is you don't have the presiding officer just say you're adjourned. So clearly Steve Simon's wrong on this stuff, but what good is it to complain about this to the press? You got to do something about it. So pull up the A1, Dawson. Let's go through real quick this article I just published on truthhurtsnews.com because, I put a tweet out, and your buddy Walter Hudson, who I think is the most vocal member of the Minnesota House Republicans, took issue with it. So I want to have a link so these guys can actually see what they're supposed to do. Although I did write back to them, and it seems like they don't have a good response to it. So once again, listen, people are hungry to see leadership. They want to see Republicans fight back. Okay? This is Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, the executive branch, by the way. We're watching literally President Trump on the 10th day of his term in office, and I don't think anyone is even the left is going to say he's a fighter, right? Because they don't like the way he's fighting. Attorneys general are fighting back against him, but they're not acting like he's Joe Biden and doing absolutely zilch, right? I mean, like there were weeks that Joe Biden barely made a news story. Trump is like every hour making a news story. Okay. Where this all comes down to, as you guys know, the Democrat, and we have to call them for what they are. They're obstructionists. They're trying to obstruct the legislative process. They want to actually not have the Minnesota House function at all. That's actually what they went to the Supreme Court trying to get done, and the Republicans are now complacent with it because they're just following it. So, Dawson, pull up Minnesota Statute 305. This actually tells exactly what happens to organize the Minnesota House. Just go back to the article. I've got it hyperlinked in the article.
Okay, cool.
It actually requires that they show up. So literally the Democrats are not only doing the wrong thing ethically and morally, they haven't even showed up to work when it says right there on the front, the members shall meet in their respective chambers. Okay. Now we've argued on this show already. The Republicans gave up a lot because they actually recognize these people as members. And I think from that last sentence, as they're called in a roll, they are there to present their certificates to be filed, and if they're filed, then they take the oath of office, and they never did that. Democrats have never done that. They did a swearing ceremony before the legislative session began. I don't know why that would count, right? But the Republicans gave up that one right away. They basically said, nope, these guys are there. But it wouldn't matter, I guess, in that regard, because the Minnesota Supreme Court thinks that it doesn't matter if there's actually members, it just matters what seats are. They're so ridiculous. Okay, so and you guys know this, last Friday, the Democrat Supreme Court published a radical order, and they declared a quorum is always 68 members, regardless of vacancies. But remember, Republicans currently have 67 members, and the Democrats have 66. And this is the stupid part of the argument by the Supreme Court is if there's 134 members, Republicans have 67, and you're alleging then the Democrats have 67, who's the member from 40B? And there's no member. It's obvious. It's a vacant seat. So that's not a member, right? It's such a ridiculous claim. But the more important thing is the Supreme Court actually stopped short of issuing a formal writ. In fact, this is what they say. Go ahead and read that Rumble Rant.
Yeah, I got a $5 Rumble Rant from Mark R108 says, when the Supreme Court nullified the 67 member congressional session, doesn't that also nullify the special election since the House did not officially call for it? And the answer is yes.
I disagree with that.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm saying that's what it's going to be interpreted as, regardless of what we think it is. The government is obviously going to, what the question is asking here is if the writ is going to be, if there's a new writ even issued, which there isn't. So
it can't be till 22 days after.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But what it says is after the first day legislative session.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the Republicans want to fight that in court, saying, well, there hasn't been a first day of the House legislative session.
Right.
But, I mean, let's be honest, Democrats aren't going to find in favor of that at all. Okay?
Yep.
I've seen that rumor going around online. That's not my reading of it.
Right, but as of now, there is no writ of special election for the 40B race, so we're still waiting on Walz to issue that.
Well, no. Once again, Jesse, pull up Minnesota statute 240D.19, Dawson. Because I hear a lot of people saying that. 240D.19. Look at you. Look at you. Now, you never would have done that before this job. Start using the search bar menu on a legislative website. There's no space between the dot and 19, by the way.
Oh.
240D.
Would this bring
we're
it up
close.
too?
240D. It's 240D. Or is it 204D? What am I?
204D.
Sorry, 204. Look at me. I'm dyslexic. 204D.19.
Yeah, typically I'd avoid websites like this, like the play.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now look at subdivision 4. See what it says is if
Right.
a vacancy results from a successful election contest.
The governor shall issue 22 days after the first day of the legislative session a writ calling for a special election unless the House in which the contest may be tried has passed a resolution in which it states that it will or will not review the court's determination.
Okay. So what's important here is he can't issue a writ until 22 days after.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about this since he issued that illegal writ, right? So that when people say he hasn't even issued a new writ, he literally can't. The Supreme Court, the Democrat Supreme Court actually found that he can't do that. All right, so he won't issue this writ until February 5th. The election will happen like probably March 11th is what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, fair point still. I mean, some people can interpret the other way. Clearly, if you can interpret.
And I think what the point is that the Republicans have an avenue to be able to try to fight it because, like you're saying, they haven't been in session yet. So there is a legal avenue, but I mean, if we're going to be relying on the Supreme Court to hand us wins, then we're never going to get anything.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing is they really need to avoid fighting things in the court, at least the Minnesota Supreme Court. That's the important thing, because holy cow, like, these guys are wackos, right? Like, well, let's move on. We can all agree on that one. So what we're seeing now is every day, as you saw in that montage, gavel in, do roll call, say there's no quorum, adjourn unilaterally. It's absolutely insane that Steve Simon would do that, but that's who the Democrats are. These guys do not care about the rule of law. They are wacko radicals, okay? And we know that. That's not even debatable. Or as Tucker Carlson would say, it's a fact. It's a fact, okay? So really it just comes down to, Republican House members, are you really just going to cave? You can't just allow the executive branch and the judicial branch to take over the Minnesota House. This is why we called it a constitutional crisis from day one, because obviously this was the direction it was going, right? And so in this case, the House should assert its power. And by the way, in the Minnesota Constitution and in the U.S. Constitution, the legislature and the Congress are the most important branches of government. It's not really three co-equal branches of government. Clearly, the most important branch of government is the House of Representatives, right? Both federally and the state, because it's the most direct vote to the people, most representative of the people, right? That it just makes sense. That's why they have the power of the purse. In the U.S., they have the power to declare war. They've abdicated that role. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court wasn't even designed to actually determine constitutionality on issues. That didn't come along until Marbury versus Madison. That wasn't the original chart of the Supreme Court. Okay, and that's actually the problem with politicians, is they're like mostly lawyers, so they just kind of follow that line of thinking. But it's the wrong kind of thinking. You know, you don't need a law degree to understand constitutionality. Let's go back to the article, Dawson. I say three things the Republicans should do. Number one, okay, for all the haters out there that think we're just whining and complaining and don't have a solution, here are your three solutions. Number one, ignore the Supreme Court's 3-page order and make them issue a formal writ before accepting their radical and unprecedented ruling. They literally said, we just assume you guys will follow this. Well, don't let them make that assumption. Make them issue a formal writ. All we have right now is 3 pages. That's all they could be bothered to do, and they did it wicked quick. And they knew what they were doing, by the way. Supreme Court knew in their the hearing that they did with both sides. They knew what they were going to rule on was going to make this whole legislative process come to a close. That they knew that, and they did it anyhow. Okay, which just shows how radical they are. So don't follow them. And I would make the argument that it's almost too late, because right away on Monday, and you made this point, Lisa Demuth just gave up her position. She went by speaker designate. That's how she's going by now. Mm-hmm. So they've already abdicated to Steve Simon and the Democrats on this. But that's what they should have done. Number one, right. Make them issue a formal writ. Now, if you could get a real backbone and be a little more hardcore, just ignore the Supreme Court's formal writ. Yeah. And actually kick this up to the federal courts, where they're not full of Democrat appointees, right? Where you should make this a national news story. Everyone in the nation should be paying attention to what the Democrats are doing in here. But they're not going to do that either, because once again, they went along with it, right? You know, the Supreme Court does not have the right to shut down one branch of government. And that's what they effectively did. Make that a national issue. Mm-hmm. But once again, I think the time has passed, because they have abdicated the role of the presiding officer.
And the rhinos are pretending like they didn't give it over. The rhinos are pretending like they had to do this. No, they didn't have to do this. Just as you're saying, they could have forced the Supreme Court to issue a formal writ. They could have continued on. And considering that they are the body that is supposed to be determining this stuff, they went in front of the court and said that you don't have jurisdiction to be determining these legislative matters over our body. And despite them saying that that was their opinion, they all of a sudden changed and said, we are going to submit to the jurisdiction. So Lisa Demuth and these other Republicans have completely let the conservatives down, because in my opinion, it seems as if the Democrats are going to get the tie back unless the Republicans can do as you're saying here and retake the power. What they need to do is reassert themselves as in that role. Paul Anderson needs to go back up to the chairman spot, just like you said. They need to elect a new speaker, and then they can forge forward. Now, some people might say it might look hypocritical for them to do so at this point, and, of course, it would look hypocritical for them to do so. But the thing is, they're already hypocritical. They've already flip-flopped on this quorum question. So why don't they become hypocritical for the truth? Why don't they flip-flop back to the truthful position? And it's not going to be allowed to have happen under Lisa Demuth because Lisa Demuth has already given it up once. So I think the Republicans need to select a new leader of the House, and they need to have a new leader who has not acquiesced and submitted to the 67-person quorum rule. So if we want to have a new leader that hasn't publicly caved to that position yet, that takes out Demuth, that takes out Niska, that takes out Peggy Bennett, that takes out establishment puppet Walter Hudson, that takes out Elliot Engen, that takes out almost a ton of people right there. But that's what it's going to have to take because if you have people who have been on the record now saying that they believe that a quorum is 68, like Harry Niska, who is on the record saying that it takes 68 votes to pass legislation, that's not a leader. That's someone who has given up the ball and allowing the Democrats to run the show right now. So Action for Liberty and Truth Hurts have definitely caught some flack for going after Demuth for saying the truth here. Action for Liberty and the Truth Hurts has Republicans saying, oh, why are you being so divisive? If we weren't telling you the truth, you guys were all going to be shocked when it happened then. Because if we were playing along with the game that Lisa Demuth and Walter Hudson were telling you, if we told you everything that the Republicans were going to tell you, then imagine how stupid we were all going to look when it happens, when the Democrats get their tie back and the Republicans lose total power. Action for Liberty and the Truth Hurts is ahead of it, and we're not afraid to call it out because there's no benefit to us to pretend like it's going to do anything otherwise. So empty suit Lisa Kamala Demuth needs to be replaced. She's no better than Kamala because she's just another empty suit who stands for nothing. She's a failed leader as the Republican leader. That's obvious. She's not a good strategist. She's handed over the power to the Democrats, and I think it's time for Republicans to find a leader who will not cave on the all-important quorum question, because if you cave on that, you cave on everything.
Yeah, I think it's probably important for us to say that we're actually, as funny as it sounds, on the Republican side here, right? You have to remember the Democrats are completely in the wrong. What we're trying
we haven't caved to the Democrats.
Right.
The Republicans have caved to the Democrats.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, they're the ones caving.
Right.
Like, why would anyone want to cave to the Democrats? Like, they're so in the wrong here. Okay, let's go to number 3. You kind of had like your own version there.
Yeah.
Here's what I think, and this is just so common sense, and I know it's common sense because, well, they've actually shown they know this, right? And I'll prove that in a second. So number 3. Refused to allow Secretary Simon to unilaterally adjourn them, just like they did on January 14th. Remember, that's what they did the first day of legislative session. Simon tried doing the same exact thing, and they just said nope. And when he left the rostrum, they put Paul Anderson there, okay? So if Simon leaves the rostrum, Republicans should put Representative Paul Anderson as the presiding officer. Then they should make the motion to compel attendance of the absent members and penalize the Democrats who aren't at the Capitol by withholding their pay. This is a constitutionally sound approach. Article 4, Section 13 specifically states that the House can operate with less than a quorum for these purposes. So here we go. Section 13 of the Minnesota Constitution, right? A majority of each House constitutes a quorum to transact business. Now, that's what the Supreme Court ruled on. They interpreted it. This is how crazy the Supreme Court is. That a majority of each House is a majority of all the seats, not a majority of the members. Actually, they did say the members and seats are the same thing, which is a ridiculous claim. That's so stupid of a claim because there's no member of 40B. But that's what they said, okay? So even if you don't take on what Jesse's saying, because clearly they've given up that right, Jesse, because they've conceded on 68.
Right.
It says right here in Article 4, Section 13, but a smaller number, so not a quorum, a smaller number may adjourn from day to day and compel the attendance of absent members in the manner and under the penalties it may provide. Clearly, in the Minnesota Constitution, and remember, no law supersedes the Minnesota Constitution. It says right there they can conduct limited business with a smaller number, which is 67, they can conduct business to compel the attendance. Well, what does that mean? Clearly, they're going to get the sergeant at arms to go arrest the members and bring them back. That's what anyone would interpret that means, right? Because that's what a lot of other states have in their statute. So get the sergeant at arms. By the way, I've seen online people saying, well, there's no sergeant at arms because they're not in session. Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Look at the Minnesota House. There are still people guarding the door. Like, they just don't have a chief sergeant at arms. They have a sergeant at arms.
Well, and that's the thing, the Republicans should have never conceded on the point that, they elected a sergeant at arms. That happened on, I think, right
they
after.
elected a chief sergeant at arms.
Right.
There's a sergeant at arms office. That's like, I don't know, a dozen members?
Right.
There's just not a chief one, technically, if they conceded on that point.
If they've conceded on that, right. So, essentially, if they have conceded, which they have, they're going to have to redo it. So, like you're saying, they're going to have Paul Anderson go back up there. And to your point on the sergeant at arms, they need to make sure that Steve Simon is removed from the chamber. That was a step that the Republicans did not take last time. That is a step that they must take moving forward because the statute clearly says in the absence of the Secretary of State. So, we need to make sure that he's absent this time. Right. So that way, get Steve Simon out of there, allow Paul Anderson to start the business, elect a speaker that is not named Lisa Kamala Demuth, and then move forward with a conservative plan. And 67 votes, I've written in a previous article about how there's plenty of examples how there are votes that have been passed with 67 votes. That's not obscure at all. That's perfectly documented throughout Minnesota history. So,
is it really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I could. I'll find the article.
Yeah, find something. That's very interesting. You didn't tell me
that's just one example. I'll show you one example. I'm sure there's hundreds to thousands of examples in Minnesota legislative history. So I'll find that and get that on the screen here.
That's awesome. Okay, so once again, and then the other part of Article 4, Section 13 literally says, under the penalties it may provide. Well, that's so generic that you could think that the penalty... Let's not even go crazy. Let's say, don't put him down in Gitmo. I know Pete Hegseth's got Guantanamo Bay opening back up. We don't need to put the Democrats down in Gitmo. Just kidding. That's just a joke. Can I joke? Okay, thank you. But I think most people would understand they shouldn't get paid. Okay. Oh, here we got a $5 Rumble rant from Brad Ganser.
All right, let's check that out here. $5 Rumble rant. Brad Ganser says, we have to give credit to Broadcorp for pointing out that the Democrats' fake swearing-in ceremony was not constitutional as well, since both houses did not authorize an off-site session. So that's a great point. And, right, I mean, these... Right, we can leave Broadcorp out of it, but to the point that the swearing-in ceremony was not authorized, I mean, that's obvious that it was done in secret by these Democrats, and it was obviously a tactic just for nothing else for Brad Tapke.
It must hurt, Brad, that you spent $5 on a Rumble rant to credit Broadcorp. Unbelievable. That guy's such a scumbag. What's a mystery to us, though, in this case, is how the Republicans... know about this. Like, they actually understand, they know, but they won't do anything. Go back to the article. This is Harry Niska's motion. Okay, this has been apparently in the hopper every day, and you'll see him standing up in that video. I think that's what confused me, Dawson, because I said scan to the Republicans. So it shows every day Niska standing there, but not saying anything, not pushing back.
Yeah, the last couple seconds, right after Steve Simon gavels every single day, is Republicans just sitting there. Just sitting there doing nothing.
Or him standing up and, not saying anything.
Right.
Pursuant to Article 4, Section 13 of the Minnesota Constitution, Niska moves that absent members be compelled to attend the next House session. Those who remain absent shall forego their legislative salary until they attend session and shall be ineligible to receive per diem for the 2025-2026 legislative session. Okay? I'd like to see a little stronger language, but it is what it is. They should be penalized. So when we say number 3, this is what they should do, they know it. Guess what the only difference is? They're not actually doing it.
Right.
They have emotion. And anyone can just have emotion.
And they should be saying
you got to actually issue that motion. You got to make that motion.
They should be saying this before the call is even done, because as soon as the call is over, Steve Simon gavels them out. I mean, you have to be interrupting him the entire time. I'm not sure why they're giving him the respect of making it seem as if they believe that these ceremonies are accurate. But I mean, if you ask Lisa Demuth, according to her, they are following the law now. So Dawson, go ahead and pull up the A5 That's a quick article. Just I want to quick show that the statement from Niska and these other Republicans, these other rhinos that are saying that you need 68 votes to pass legislation, that is a blatant lie, and that's not true at all. So once you pull that up, Dawson, go ahead and scroll down just a little bit more. There we go. It's a blatant lie that legislation requires 68 votes to pass. A quick example from the House passing a bill with only 67 votes can be found, which can likely be found hundreds to thousands of times in Minnesota history, is the following vote from 1973. See below. And so as you can see, that legislation moved along from the floor with 67 yes votes. So it just goes to show, and I think that there was even a speaker election in the past. I'd have to look that up, but I think there was a speaker election where a person only received 67 votes, and you have to wonder, Lucy Rehm, a Democrat in the Minnesota House, is saying that it takes 68 votes to elect a speaker. So are the Republicans conceding that they won't even be able to elect a speaker if the Democrats show up too? It's hard to tell with these Republicans because they're conceding on every single point so far. We have to wonder how far they're willing to go, and I think this Melissa Hortman is totally whipping the Republicans. It's not even close. She's whooping butt, and they're not even showing up. It shows how pathetic the Republicans are. How do you lose to people not even showing up? They're losing, despite the optics. The Republicans have the winning argument here. They have the winning message. They have the winning symbolism, and still the Democrats are beating them. We got Melissa Hortman, who's, keeping her people in lockstep to not show up to the Capitol. And meanwhile, the Republicans can't even keep a consistent position on the quorum. So it's no wonder why the Democrats are, getting all these benefits out of this situation because, they are obviously strategically better aligned. And we got a $5 rumble in. I'll get to that real quick. Phil Can says the MNGOP notified BPOUs to hold off on recall efforts because a deal was being cut with Democrats. Pathetic. That is news to me. I haven't heard about that. And that would be a major issue because we don't need to be working with Democrats at this point. Just as Jake had said, that our call should not be to tell Democrats to show up to the Capitol. Instead, what the call should be is for Republicans to do their job. So the Republicans are also failing to do their job by just sitting around and allowing Steve Simon to hold the gavel when he has no authority to do so. That's news to me, Brad. Failed candidate.
Oops. Cindy Lou, I got to respond to her. What can local BPOUs do to compel the Republicans? So let me get to that in just a minute. But I didn't want to forget it. How did you even find this, Bill? I'm going back and looking at this, and you're right. There were 67 yeas and 52 nays, and it passed.
Right. I went.
How many seats were there? Less seats at that time?
No, I think that I just went to a time where I knew that there was 67 members of either the Republicans or Democrats or whatever it was. So I just picked a time where I knew that would be the vote.
We should look and see if the seats were different.
Yeah.
Because then, did they just open up a can of worms and all the bills that were passed with 67 are no longer legal?
Right. Yeah. If that's what they want to do, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. So if they want to do that.
Technically, if there was a quorum, there wasn't a quorum because they didn't have 60. That's what we need to do.
Right.
Every journal has a quorum as present. Mm-hmm. We should see if there's a quorum that existed with 67. Any business that day should be found illegal by the Minnesota Supreme Court. See, you fuckers, you brought this on yourself. Sorry about the language, guys. But the Supreme Court, you just brought this shit on yourself right here. Okay? By such a radical thing. By the way, we know with the Minnesota Supreme Court ruling, it already nullifies one part of Minnesota law. Minnesota Chapter 3, I don't remember which part it is, but it's literally like in the case of an attack, it says a quorum can be less than, a majority of the House because, maybe many members pass away from an attack on America. Well, too bad. That's illegal now. That's unconstitutional because it's always 68, according to these guys. It's just a radical view. It's so insane. Okay, let's go back to the article. So here, I thought perhaps we just don't see a strategy because all the Republicans are doing is show up, trying to get the talking point of the day. Let's get the Democrats to show up. It's like, why is that a motivating factor for us? So maybe we don't see the strategy. Well, last night, your buddy, Walter Hudson, quote tweeted me, so I got a notification, and he's basically undermining what I was saying. Here's my tweet. I said, think about this. Minnesota House Democrats are clearly in the wrong for not showing up to the Capitol, but they're still winning because House GOP won't do what's necessary to take back the House from Steve Simon and issue penalties. It's sad we could lose to obstructionists. And Walter writes, snarkily, notice he doesn't define, quote, what's necessary. Now, obviously, I have 280 characters here. I can't go through all three of those damn points.
The thing is, Walter knows what's necessary because he was
Correct.
present on the first day of session where they took the gavel. So
Yes.
for him to try to play dumb, it's not working, Walter. We see right through you.
Yes. Is that an... Oh, did we just read that rumble? Okay,
Yep.
that is. All right, so I respond to Walter. Notice how you guys have allowed the Secretary of State to run the House, the oldest member, and then I tell him, number 3, oldest member Paul Anderson should preside over the House. You guys get sergeant-at-arms to compel attendance and penalize the Dems. This is all legally sound and in statute and constitution, which they know, right? So this is his response, and this just shows that they really have no fight in them. Just like no one is going to do that because you said so, they're not going to do it because we said so. Official actions have to be recognized as such and enforced. No one is going to recognize or enforce that. Then why even get out of your house in the morning? Why do anything? If you just don't think you can win the next argument, just why are you doing this?
And who is it? Who is it on to recognize or enforce it? The House, the legislative body that he's a part of,
Right.
The very people, just as he had argued that the court has no jurisdiction, that the Supreme Court shouldn't be interfering in legislative business. It's the same exact argument now. Well, who's going to enforce it? You are. You and the rest of the Republicans are going to have to be the ones to enforce it. That is your responsibility as an elected member.
Well, if only there was something they could do, Jesse. I mean,
Right.
they only have 67 members of the Minnesota House.
Yeah, they only have a majority.
If only they had some bit of power to do something. This is what our problem is like you literally watch Donald Trump, even before he had the power, he wasn't even president. He was calling shots. It's ridiculous. Anyone in the media with a could look at you in the face and say Joe Biden is the reason they had a ceasefire in Gaza. Everyone knows who got that done, right? Okay. Donald Trump makes things happen even when he's not in power. You guys have a majority of the Minnesota House right now. You can do something. I saw another person tweet at me going, yeah, well, then they won't listen to you. They'll find you out of order and they'll just move on with business. And then what? I go, what do you mean then what? How about you start with doing it?
Yeah.
Let's just start by actually standing up and doing it. And by the way, the people will be with you on this one because the Democrats are crazy. But you know what? It doesn't do you any good to show up to the Capitol every single day and just say, oh, day 17 of the Democrats not showing up.
Yeah.
Guess what? I can tell you it's going to be day 45. I think
Right.
that's what the number, whatever the number
And
is.
how many
They're not going to
days-
show up to March.
How
That's
many
just what's gonna
days
happen.
are the Republicans just going to sit there and do nothing? We got a $5 rumble in from Mark R108 says, before you guys came along, it was very hard to know what was going on in our state government and in the two main parties. So thank you. Keep up the great work. Well, we appreciate that, Mark. And
Mark
obviously
108 just made my day right there.
Yeah,
That's
we
exactly
appreciate it.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Right. Not many people are willing to trade in relationships with politicians in order to just say the truth. And, that's why Action for Liberty, the Truth Hurts is so important because we really don't care if we're liked by the establishment because in all honesty, our priorities are not the same as the establishment's priorities. We want to see a liberty agenda pushed through in Minnesota, and the establishment, Republicans, just want to see themselves keep power, but they can't even seem to do that effectively. So that's why Action for Liberty has to continue to be the truth tellers.
I have a friend I was chatting with yesterday. He's like, yeah, I go to some events with kind of establishment types, and they just shit talk Action for Liberty. And they said, you're really unpopular. I go, actually, we're very popular with the grassroots. It's just the fact that in those kind of rooms, they hate us. But the reason they hate us is because they aren't willing to do what the grassroots wants. There's this divide right now. And Trump knows what's going on. Trump, from day one, took on the biggest issue amongst the base, the border. He took it on. He was on point. And since then, he understands. He understands so much better than all these guys. I don't know if it's just that they're fakers and they don't want to fight, or they're just generally grew up to be a bunch of pussies. But one of the two things has got to be it. And they just don't fight. And no, we're listen, if we lose, We lose together, we regroup and figure out a way to do it. Look, I'm a coach of kids. You know, we don't win every game. But my kids are going to show up to the game and try. Like, this is not how you coach a team. Lisa Demuth, don't have your people go there and not try. Put your best effort forward, and you might just win, by the way. Well, you are going to win because the people are behind you. It's ridiculous. These guys are getting paid to not show up. So you got to show up and try, and we lose together. But the reason Action for Liberty calls this stuff out, the reason we on the Truth Hurt Show call this stuff out, is because you're not even trying. You're literally letting Steve Simon hijack the Minnesota House. That's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. You are 67 majority, member majority. Do something with that power. Because guess what? The Democrats aren't showing up to March. Well, actually, I take that back. If I'm wrong on that, it's because Republicans have caved more and actually came with some agreement, some power sharing agreement, and we watch how that works in the Minnesota Senate. And then you really screwed everyone. So do something. Stand up. Look at what Donald Trump is doing. That is the playbook.
Right. It would be a liberal power sharing agreement that definitely grows government. And we should point out that, you know, what's the plan with this whole delay tactic? What are the Democrats actually going to do? What it's going to likely end up doing is towards the end of session, what's going to happen is they're going to be combining everything into giant omnibus bills that are thousands of pages long. And then they say, you have to pass this or you are going to be shutting down the government. And then you'll see all the rhinos get in line for it. You'll see the Democrats and the rhinos form the uniparty, and we'll see who the conservatives are that vote against it. So, you know, but that's what's going to likely end up happening is once the Democrats get their 67th seat and it's a tie again, and they can block the revoking of Brad Tabke's election certificate, once the Democrats have the votes to be able to do that, which will help with Steve Simon still as the chair if that's how they decide to pursue that. But regardless, we're going to see, you know, a bunch of omnibus bills at the end of session to fund the government, and we're going to see a lot of rhinos go along with it.
Okay. By the way, to the nice comments here, the best thing you can do for this show is spread the message. Share this with people. Email to them. Let them know where to find us. Let's grow our audience. Let's tell the truth to more people. You know, I'm not saying that we get everything right, but when we tell you something, we believe it to be true. Okay? That's the only thing we got for the show, is our integrity.
Yeah,
right,
unlike
so I'm going to tell you what I believe to be true from years of experience of doing this.
Right, unlike Lisa Demuth, who will tell you that the quorum is 67, then a week later she'll tell you that it's 68. We're still of the same opinion that it's 67. So, you know, if only the Republicans were, you know, kept the spine that they initially pretended like they had for the first couple of weeks, we would still be in a good position. We would still be able to see the Republicans pushing good things. But since they've given up the power, there is very little hope for them to be able to get it back unless they regrow a spine.
All right, to answer Cindy Lou's, what can you do at BPOUs? Show up to your local Republican Party with your Republican legislator and demand that they actually stand up to Steve Simon. Don't accept any answers short of they are going to stand up and do something on the House floor. If he's going to try to unilaterally adjourn them, they need to stand up. They should be shouting. The only knowledge I have at this point, I could be wrong, but the only knowledge I have at this point is that at least Representative Drew Roach on Monday stood up and basically refused Steve Simon unilaterally adjourning him. And from what I could tell, he was criticized by and talked to by members of his own caucus. So that's ridiculous.
I think it was the Minnesota Reformer reported that the spokesman for the GOP caucus said that was not their official position when Drew said that Steve Simon was abusing his role and did not have the authority to be up there and all else he said. So the GOP does not stand by a member who calls out the truth.
Yeah, who's clearly in the right. Okay, this next section or part of the show is brought to you by Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, give my good friend Warren Wessel a call at 612-419-7453. Oh, Cindy Lou's an ST-38, which is a DFL island. Yeah, that's tougher, right? It's much tougher because obviously you don't have a Republican representative. But if you do have a Republican representative, it's probably a good idea to demand this. Also, if you guys are not premium subscribers, I just put the link there in the Rumble Live. Become a premium subscriber. Go to truthhurts.com, truthhurtsnews.com. The link I posted goes directly to it. But go to truthhurtsnews.com, click on the top, support us, $8 a month or $88 a year. You get a month off. That helps tremendously with our show. We hope to tackle, I've had a very busy January. This is obviously not a full-time job. So, but we hope to continue building, and maybe we could have some full-time people here. And we want to do some investigative journalism. We got a really good one in mind. So hopefully you can help us. And then also you get access to our post show where we give you some rumors and gossip that's going around in Minnesota politics.
Which,
okay.
Really quick, I have to bring up, Locals has been throwing me the same error this whole time, so I don't think we've been live on it at all. I don't know if we can do a post show over there. It's not on our side. It's a Locals issue because I recreated the stream and everything, tried everything I could, and nothing's working over there.
Yeah, it's clearly not. What we could do, here's what I would suggest for you guys. If you are, well, I guess Mark's not going to do their show live, are they?
No, he doesn't.
Oh, rats. I was going to say they should watch Mark's show, but I guess it's not going to be live.
Well, you should. You
Yeah,
should
still watch Mark's show.
Watch an episode you haven't seen yet.
There you go. Okay, well, I guess we're not gonna have a post show today. Usually we do. They're super fun.
This doesn't happen typically with Locals, so become
Gotcha.
a premium
Oh,
subscriber.
one show note. I think we're gonna have a J6er here in studio next week. So someone that actually just got pardoned by Donald Trump, who was in prison. Should be a very interesting story. So that should be here next week. I don't know which day, but we're gonna shoot for Tuesday. All right, this part of the show is about CCAP fraud. Let's go ahead, the B1, Dawson. This was a story from KSTP News. They broke this Tuesday night. That's why we didn't talk about it on Tuesday's show. But we know CCAP very well. Go ahead and hit that play button because I think they're going to put ads up front. So just keep it off Oh, no, never mind. I guess you have the ad blocker, don't you?
Yep.
All right, so CCAP was something Action for Liberty fought against, actually tried to get rid of this program. Child Care something program? What's the A stand for? Child Care Assistance Program. CCAP is essentially a redistribution of wealth. Every Republican should be against this thing. Why on earth is the government in the business of child care? That is such a ridiculous claim. So it should have been an obvious yes vote from Republicans. Nope. They fought against us. They would not get on board with ending CCAP, even though $100 million that we knew of had actually ended up going to fraudulent daycare centers that didn't even have children in them and got flown over to fund terrorism overseas. Big story. I think that was 2019, maybe it was 2018. Huge story. So we called on Republican leadership, Paul Gazelka, leadership, weakling, and then I think that by that time the Republicans were in the minority in the House. It just fell in deaf ears. These guys didn't want to do anything about it until Mort took office, and Mort actually had a bill that ended the CCAP program. Mm-hmm. Now, as you guys know, we were ready to fight this in 2020. There's some kind of, I don't know, big nationwide global issue that came up in 2020 that really required us to build and grow and fight against. So obviously COVID, totalitarianism, stole the show, and we had to fight that. So CCAP wasn't our main issue to fight against, but we shouldn't even have to build resources and fight against it. Republicans should have just taken the leadership on that, right? Why are we funding other people's child care? Why don't if you want to solve this issue, you think the government's got a role, how about just give them tax credits? As long as they do child care on their own, give them a tax credit. It's their money anyhow. So anyhow, this is now a new story of massive fraud. I'm just gonna give you a warning here. When you see Jay Crowell's going to these sites, your blood is gonna boil. I mean, it's so stupid how much these people rip us off. Go ahead, play it. Go full screen too.
Crack down on fraud in state government programs after scandals questioned their oversight.
We got complaints about the Child Care Assistance Program and took a closer look at some of the daycare centers receiving millions of your taxpayer dollars. And we found reports of violations state investigators called a threat to the safety of children at centers that continued to receive those federal dollars.
Jay Cole spent months looking into these issues, and he joins us now with what he's found in a story you're seeing first on 5. Jay.
Yeah, Lindsay, CCAP is a $34 million state program that receives federal funding. It benefits more than 12,000 low-income families each month across the entire state. Learning of growing concerns about the program from sources at the Capitol, I started looking into some of the daycares receiving the most money. Despite many serious safety violations over multiple years, they continue to receive funding. And now some state lawmakers want an investigation into what they call a lack of oversight of the CCAP program. I started by visiting Quality Learning Center Daycare, so it is that 14B, which sits right in the heart of downtown Minneapolis. Between 2019 and 2023, the Minnesota Department of Human Services found 95 violations at this location. They range from failure to keep hazardous items away from children to no records for 16 children, which include things like immunizations, emergency contacts, and medical needs. So state investigators placed Quality Learning Center on a conditional license in 2022. I went to the daycare's location several times and only
that looked like
once
an upstanding
did I
place.
see people there. Oh, that's your daycare. But I did not see any children.
Oh, shocker.
No.
After school? Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you. DHS declined an interview, but in a statement acknowledged Quality Learning Center was put on a conditional license because of its poor safety record. But it still received nearly $8 million in taxpayers' money since 2019. Its conditional status removed in 2024. I also went to yet another facility, the Minnesota Child Care Center in this South Minneapolis building. I found it at the end of this small hallway with a steel door, no windows, and no visible security cameras.
You got to be kidding me.
State records show between 2021 and 2023.
What a joke. And they put a sign up like that's an actual place.
Some of them serious. They failed to request initial background checks on 6 staff in 2023 and failed to request repeat background checks on 8 staff in 2024. Ultimately, the state would accept corrective documentation on these violations.
Wasn't anybody here last time either.
It's a mockery. It's a mockery that they even put that sign up as if this is an actual child care facility.
And each time, no apparent sign
Look at
of
that
any
door,
children.
Too.
Since 2018, Minnesota Child Care Center, however, received $11.5 million in CCAP money. I asked DHS why daycare centers could still receive millions of dollars with questionable safety records over multiple years. In a statement, DHS said under state law, they can only stop payment, quote, when a provider intentionally gives false information or submits false attendance records. A provider is operating after a suspension or revocation of its license. There's a credible allegation of fraud and or a provider refuses access to attendance records.
What does that say to you?
It says that the oversight is incredibly lacking.
I shared our findings with House Speaker designate Lisa Damon.
Are we keeping kids in Minnesota safe? And what you're showing me here brings that very much into question. You know, Jay, you have pages here that are publicly available with repeated failure to keep hazardous items away from children, failure to maintain adequate staff-to-child ratios, background checks, failing to keep personnel files. These are repeated violations.
As I was looking into the daycare center violations, I also found a connection between CCAP and the Feeding Our Future scam, which built $250 million from the state.
Shocker of the year right there.
In 2023, a man named Abdikadir Kadaya was charged with stealing $1 million in taxpayer money in the Feeding Our Future case. He's waiting to be sentenced after pleading guilty to wire fraud. But we also learned Kadaya also operated Intisar Child Care Center in Minneapolis. The facility received $1.8 million in taxpayer funds between 2017 and 21. But the license was revoked and Kadaya's daycare was shut down.
All right, that's good enough. I mean, thanks to KSTP and investigative journalism to get into that. I mean, my God, if only if only somebody or some group was calling for eliminating the CCAP program that today is continuously being used to take your taxpayer money and funnel it to scam artists by the millions, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars.
Is this kind of thing a good idea if they can be 100% sure that there's no like?
No, I'm.
it?
Well, it's like there's this old trope. It's like government's not full of angels, right? Like this idea that government's so great, it's not full of angels, right? Of course, if we were all angels, we wouldn't need government in the first place. It's the dilemma here. You're never going to get good governance, right? It's actually, in many reasons, why I'm so supportive of Donald Trump with, trying to get rid of federal workers, because you have to. They're just clog things up, and it's such an obvious reason why. So there's no incentive by a government employee to do great work for a customer. So just think of like a DMV. That's the greatest example. DMV's known to be so terrible. Post office, another great example. They're not incentivized because they don't really technically have customers. People are forced to use their service. Actually, in the case of the Postal Service, there's at least some bit of competition on some of their services, right? So there's just not an incentive there. But when you're in the private sector, when you're a business, you have all the incentive in the world, because if you suck, your competition's going to get your business. So there's just no way to really solve this thing, and that's why government needs to be limited, I try to entertain as many arguments for privatizing things, but I still think the military probably should be a government operation. So there's some rules for actual government, but most of the rules out there should be private sector. And in this case, Dawson, it's so simple. Because there's definitely a child care problem. No one's denying that, right? And that part of that is because most people are two-income households, and so they don't have someone that can watch children before school age, right? And there's lots of reasons for that. One of them is you can't really afford to have a single income household these days because of inflation. But there's the way they solve it is a government program, which is just going to drive up costs anyhow, because you're going to have a bureaucracy managing it, and then you're going to get scam artists taking money from you. The other way to manage it is keep the government out of it and incentivize people with their own money. Give them an ability to shield it from taxes. Like my position always is I don't want people to have to pay any taxes. I'd rather they spend that money on their family. And in this case, if you think child care is a real legitimate thing that people should lose tax liability on, then just let them keep all their money and don't get involved in the process.
Yeah, and we also got a $5 rumber ant. Righty says state must have way too much money if they can do that. Right. And I think he's saying wasting all that money. And that's a great point. I mean, if Minnesota actually wanted to get down to the numbers, I'm sure that Minnesota's government could properly function if you cut it down to its most basic elements. If you cut the budget by 2/3, you could still probably have it function as a state government needs to.
At this point, I've been acknowledged that I should make an appeal for you guys to attend your conventions if you're a delegate to either party, and should run to become a state central delegate. Mm-hmm. Look at the conspiracy thread. So this message has been brought to you by, what was it, tennis player? What did we call him on election night? I think it was tennis player.
Can't remember.
Yeah, it was something like that. Or tennis fan. I'm sure Tushi's also watching this message. Make sure you go to your convention and become a state central delegate. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! All right, I'm too much fun. All right. You got an article up on actionforliberty.com. What's in this?
Yeah, we could pull it up. The B2, Dawson. We pretty much have gone over most of what we've talked about already, but go ahead and scroll down to the Eric Mortensen part. Go ahead and scroll down just a little bit more. That's what Damuth is saying. But yeah, this is something Eric Mortensen put up in February 25th, 2019. So obviously he's been on top of this issue for years, where he was calling out Brad Tabke for spending this money. And go ahead and scroll down just a little bit further to see that Action for Liberty has always been on top of this issue too, because we were calling out Enabler, Jim Abler, who was also, fully on board with the fraudulent child care spending. So, while these Republicans are talking tough now, we'll have to see if they actually want to take action, because when Eric Mortensen put forward that bill to eliminate the program, he wasn't having any Republican co-sponsors on that bill. So where have the Republicans been on this issue when it's been an issue for years? Why are they just talking about it now? Why is it until KSTP puts something out that they finally decide to act on it? They have the control. They have the majority. It's time for them to do something with it.
Now, speaking of KSTP, Dawson, pull up the B3. This is actually Tom Hauser reporting from 2019. As this was falling on deaf ears with the Senate Republicans, we flew a plane saying, hey, Walls, Gazelka, stop funding fraud, which they knew what we were talking about at that point. They were funding child care fraud by continuing to seek. I mean, look, geez, the power of prophecy here. We could only see that if they continue funding CCAP, this would happen. Gee, weren't we right on that one? I mean, and by the way, it's been happening for 4 or 5 years. What's 2019? 5 years ago? Holy crap. Oh, almost 6 years. Jeez, has it really almost been 6 years? Holy crap. Time flies. We saw it coming. Fell on deaf ears. This is a Republican establishment. They don't fight. They don't fight. By the way, if you guys fight, we're on board with you. We'll be singing your praises. You know what we're not going to do is we're not going to keep reiterating that the Democrats need to show up at the Capitol. It doesn't make any sense for us. All right, this last segment's brought to you by, and they're going to appreciate this segment being brought to you by, John Galt Mortgage Company. If you're looking to buy a home, give John Galt Mortgage a chance at financing that home. Go to johngaltmortgage.com. Piers Morgan is in Saudi Arabia. I think there's a boxing match. Is it UFC or boxing? What's going on in Saudi Arabia? I'm not as big of a boxing fan. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I'll look it up.
God, I almost feel like there's a UFC fight in Saudi Arabia. Huh. I'm not 100% certain on this one. We'll get you the answer. Anyhow, I think they're covering it. Actually, if Piers Morgan and Tucker are there, you would think it's a boxing fight.
Oh, they're in the UAE, aren't they?
Well, they've done a lot of fights there. Oh, I thought they were in Saudi Arabia. Well, maybe they're there.
No, I'll look into
somehow
it.
Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson are in Saudi Arabia at the same time. So they did each other's show, and Tucker says Saturday morning UFC. Oh yeah, Sean Strickland's fighting, I think. Okay, sorry, I gotta deviate here. I hate not knowing. Is it UFC 3?
Yeah, and it was in Saudi Arabia.
It is in Saudi Arabia? UFC 312, Dricus Duplessis versus Sean Strickland. So they're running it back. No, that's February 8th. Why would they be there that far in advance? Is it UFC 311? Nope, that one already happened. God, I don't watch the UFC. You know, they keep saying UFC keeps growing. I just don't even watch it as much as I used to. Although Sean Strickland's very entertaining, I got to admit. You know who that is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you'd like him. All right, anyhow,
Yeah, no BS. Yeah, he just says it as it is.
He's unfiltered. He's very unfiltered. Oh, he's a damn good fighter.
And Tucker says Adesanya, so maybe Israel Adesanya's fighting.
Oh, is it a free card? Yeah, I thought I saw Israel Adesanya was fighting. Hold on 1 second here. I can't believe they're doing a free card. Well, you know what's probably happening is they're doing a card. I wouldn't be shocked that they're doing a card that the Saudi princes are paying for here.
Yeah.
Saturday, February 1st. And he's fighting a guy I don't even know the name of. Can't even pronounce it. A bunch of international fighters. They got a heavyweight. Rosenstruik is fighting. That's good. All right. Where is this at? What? So funny.
I'm just curious why
Saudi
we're
Arabia.
talking about Saudi Arabia and Piers Morgan.
Okay, well, yes, fair point. Boy, did I really chase a squirrel on that one. They're both in Saudi Arabia. Must be for the fight. I think that's what's going on. So they run into each other, and they do each other's show. This is what I found to be a very interesting admission by Piers Morgan. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Go ahead, play it.
was, you mentioned COVID, and it was interesting. It really changed my thinking about these things. In COVID, I got overly emotionally engaged because I knew people who were dying of COVID, and it was awful. And in Britain, we handled it very badly. But I got led down a line which I wish I hadn't been led down. I'll give an example. When the scientists said, if you have the vaccine, you can't transmit the virus, I believed them. And I became wrongly censorious, really badly censorious. I was saying to people, if you don't have it now, knowing that if you have it, you can't transmit the virus, you're going to go and kill old people, you're going to kill people. It's not about you, it's about the people you may infect and kill. And it turned out to be completely wrong. They later said, months and months later, actually, there's no difference whether you have the vaccine or not in terms of transmitting the virus. And at that point, I realized I'd been misled completely.
Had you already gotten the vaccine?
Yeah.
Did you know that it made you impotent when you got it? I'd heard that. Is that not?
That's not true.
It's not true.
I can confirm that's not true. But here's my point.
Such a dick. I can't control myself.
No, but that's why I like you. That's why we get on so well. The interesting point about both of them was that we were both kind of.
He's such an interesting guy. He's got the weirdest laugh.
Who, Tucker Carlson?
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you guys think about that? Like, I have a hard time forgiving some of the people in power and media during that time.
He wants to play dumb.
Right.
I didn't understand it before, but now that Trump's won, now that the conservatives have power, I had it all wrong. I don't care.
You think that's what it is?
All these people are phonies. Yeah. Piers Morgan is never the real deal. No, I think Chris Cuomo's more trustworthy.
Really?
I think so. Not that Chris Cuomo's trustworthy at all, but yeah. No, I think Piers Morgan's a total phony. He's just out there for clicks. That's all. That's his whole show.
So, Dawson?
Oh yeah, it's all clickbait.
I mean, I've watched a lot of his things versus
that comes up, yeah.
some of the liberal people that I watch, and he's always like baiting for clips.
Yeah,
it's like, I think that he's being honest when he's saying that he feels misled by a lot of the information that came out, and then they were like, "Oh, actually, that's not true." I think
it's a matter of fact that he was misled, right?
But I don't think that he's genuine in this. Like, yeah, I was wrong, and I feel bad about it. He wants the clip, and he got it. So.
Well, I guess we'll see in the next pandemic, right? But that's what really bothers me is it's hard for me to forgive. Maybe I'm just not that great of a person because the people in the media not only told us lies, and they just didn't even fact check the institutions, which we were all becoming very skeptical of. It's the fact that they didn't even stand up when the speech was being silenced.
Right, and these are grown adults. It's like, how can I make an excuse for someone like Piers Morgan to not understand it when I was perfectly capable of understanding it as it all played out?
Yeah, that's the tricky thing is, I never got fooled by this. The only thing I think I was ever on board with was 15 days to slow the spread, because to this day that still makes a ton of sense. But I was never on board with anything else, and of course it really became evident that the 15 days was going to become 15 weeks and 15 months, and right. Mm-hmm. But it's like, at least the initial thing was, hey, we're all in this together. Let's not overwhelm the healthcare system. We got to slow the spread so that the hospitals and healthcare industry can catch up. That makes sense to this day. I hope any big pandemic or anything, we do that same thing. Okay. Now, it can't be decreed by a governor. You can't take rights away. But I think the vast majority of us are going to say, yes, I agree. Let's do what we can to not overwhelm the healthcare system. And after that, I don't know if there was anything that I agreed with on their response. It was so bogus. I was very optimistic on the vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. But from day one, I wasn't going to take it. I wasn't going to be their experiment. I hoped it worked. I really did. Wouldn't that be great? This technology so quickly. But, like, come on. First of all, I don't even know how I could say that, because I wouldn't have gotten it, because I don't think it's actually ready for the market. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't have possibly tested it, and you couldn't possibly know the adverse reactions, because it just so happens that it takes years to understand it, or the long-term effects. It just takes years to figure that out.
There goes YouTube.
Oh shit, no, not anymore. I'm actually interested. I don't know if YouTube's going to take us down anymore.
You should say something really controversial and see what happens.
Well, let me tell you about the Jews real quick.
That'll do it. That will do it. Yeah.
Even under the Trump administration, they'll let them take us down for that one.
I've gotten my videos taken off of YouTube for talking about being Jewish before. It's really fun. I don't know how it works, but I don't know.
They should be kicked out of the club then. No, I wonder if YouTube's gonna, cave to the. Well, I shouldn't say cave. Do the right thing now because Trump's in charge. Facebook was real quick, even before Trump took office. What's T-Wall have to say here?
Yeah, T-Wall for Life says, it all went downhill when politicians and others started shaming anyone who questioned masks, vaccines, and lockdowns, etc.
Yeah, politicians needed to stay out of it. Nobody trusts politicians anyways, so why are they giving their opinions?
Yeah, well, they never told us the truth from the beginning that it came from a lab. Trump was actually one of the few people that was saying it came from a lab, and, they said it was misinformation and a lie and all that, so... right from the jump of COVID, they weren't being honest with us.
It's a good thing you got those vaccinations out quick.
Yeah, that was after the election. They approved of it, so yeah. That was all political too, of course.
Well, I'm not gonna hate on Trump right now. I'm just not.
Right.
I think I'm very glass half full. I like to see what he's doing. I don't agree with everything Trump is doing, but boy, is he showing that he's a fighter. Damn. And it's also exposing, I asked Jesse if we should do things on the hearings, RFK and stuff, and he's like, no, we shouldn't do it. Even though, I couldn't screw up my RFK impression. I almost should have tried that. Sometimes to do an impression, which I'm not terrible at, you kind of have to do a couple words and stuff. Going at it cold's impossible. But I do have a good RFK impression. I'm not going to do it right now.
I'm glad that...
And due respect to him, I actually think seems to be a pretty good guy.
I'm glad that we didn't do that, because if you told me to put together a montage 3 minutes long of RFK talking, I'd probably quit. I don't know
his voice, you get used to it after a while.
It sounds like he doesn't even get used to it after a while.
Incognito says, remember USS Liberty. Ooh, are we taken down now? Uh-oh. Didn't happen. Nothing to see here. No, but RFK's hearing just shows right now that the Democrats are just frauds. It's shown how much of a fraud Bernie Sanders is. Go ahead and read that.
Yeah, we got a $5 rumble rant from Mark R108 says the Constitution does not go away just because a politician declares an emergency. Problem is all the lemmings.
And the Minnesota courts once again found that according to the statutes, you can just override the Constitution's division of powers during an emergency. It's ridiculous. But you're 100% right. The Constitution needs to stand for all times, even in emergencies, right? I remember the argument against our Never Again bill to this day. What if we got a nuclear attack? I'm like, I don't think anyone's going to be wondering what governance we have during a nuclear attack, so shut up the stupid questions.
Yep.
The point of the matter is, when you have a manageable pandemic, you can't just declare an emergency and do whatever the hell you want, right? And by the way, even if we have a nuclear attack, I assume as the chaos subsides, we need to follow our Constitution again, right? But I don't think anyone's going to care about governance when 90% of the people are dead. It's a dumb argument. So I was talking about Bernie Sanders. It's funny to watch Bernie Sanders be another little bitch.
I know, he's such a joke.
He's such a joke.
It's so crazy. Of all the questions you could ask RFK Jr. about health and human services, that's a huge position. There's so many things to get into. What does he do? He brings up a poster of a onesie, and he says, will you stop selling these on your website? And he's like, I don't even run the organization anymore. Right. So, yeah, it just showed that Bernie is... he's out to lunch. It was so crazy. It's like he's just like any one of these other Democrats. He's not an independent because he just falls for all of the stupid, most ridiculous things. Just for him to be focused on a onesie instead of real issues tells you everything you need to know about Bernie.
That's the one that I watched. I haven't watched through the whole thing. I don't know if I could with how it sounds, but
it's all predictable. You can guess exactly. You can guess exactly what the Democrats are going to say. You can guess exactly what most of the Republicans are going to say. It was interesting to see a couple of the rhinos actually have his back, but I think that's more out of fear that Trump will force them out. With a primary challenge next time.
So is RFK consistently now saying that he is pro-vaccine.
Oh my God! So this is the other thing that bothers me: is they act as if he's just against all vaccines. They act as if he was against the polio vaccine, and he had a problem with was one of the polio vaccines, which showed to have, I think, bad side effects, and they lied on studies. So part of what they do is they misrepresent the viewpoint that he has. And you're not going to get in these hearings because these senators, I don't have enough time, so don't interrupt me. I'm just going to keep doing it. They're just shouting talking points. But if you really, and this is the thing that's beautiful about RFK Jr., his whole campaign was doing long form podcasts. So you can actually understand what the guy thinks through long form podcast. And you don't learn it from hearings. Is he against all vaccines? He never was.
Then
he obviously knows that there's problems with vaccines, especially one that's not even a vaccine that they called the COVID
Right.
vaccine.
Well, his position was always that he wanted these vaccines to have more testing, and that once they had testing that was done by people who didn't have a financial or monetary interest in the success of the vaccine, then once it was tested by a neutral third party like that, then he would say it should be approved.
That's what I always thought his position was like almost like, instead of putting all the vaccines in them right away, like give parents the option to spread it out. That's what I always thought his position was, which can be problematic in certain cases or whatever. But I think that's why the onesie is specifically weird to me, because it's like, if that's your stance, why put out a onesie that says unvaccinated specifically and proud or whatever?
Yeah, well, it could be referring, like an easy way of referring to a specific one. Like, I was in the Army, obviously I've had vaccinations, right? Like, I'm unvaxxed. I clearly say I'm unvaxxed when it comes to COVID. So I would just use the term I'm not vaxxed, but I'm vaxxed on a lot of other things, right? You see what I'm saying?
But like on a baby? Like a onesie?
Well, in that case, like, so I know he's against, is it hepatitis C? There's one there's one vaccine. This one's a really interesting one. I had never heard this before. I think it was RFK, but maybe it was someone different. That they give this to infants at birth, or newborns. And the only way to get this is through shared needles with drug use or sexually transmitted. But they give it to newborn babies. Why? Mm-hmm. Why would you stick a baby? None of these are high risk. Like, if you have you suspect the mother is a drug user, maybe there could be cases then. But why would you do this to newborns? Mm-hmm. So there's something really goofy with the schedule.
But give them a vaccination for Hep B.
Yeah, is it Hep B?
It might be.
Whatever it is. Whatever the one is where the only way you transmit it is through shared needles or sexually transmitted.
Well, I mean, isn't that for giving the kid the antibodies that later in life?
Yeah, but to think about, okay, so I don't know if you've ever held a newborn. Obviously, more than just my 3 sons, but obviously my 3 sons. You're not holding a very stable, resilient entity. I'm trying to think of a scientific way to put it without dehumanizing him, but essentially, I was gonna say organism. That sounds terrible, right?
Yeah.
They literally need their mother. They need mother's embrace. They actually want skin-to-skin contact with the mother. A newborn baby has to have contact with a mother. Do you know that? Like, literally, I think they can die. Like, they need that contact. That's why nurses in a newborn ward would actually have to pick them up and cradle them. They have to have that. And then obviously they need nourishment, and generally speaking, mother's milk, although you could obviously supplement that these days. So you're not talking about something that has a lot of stability. So the idea that you would shoot them up with drugs right away is crazy.
Were you
now there's some that you might want to, but the idea that you would do it with Hep B would be ridiculous.
Were you vaccinated as a baby?
Oh, well, I was born in 82. So I'm 20 some years older than you guys. So, or not that much older than you, but the vaccinations we got when we were young are probably a third of what you guys would have got, or at least what babies today get. Obviously I don't know what the hell I got vaccinated with or how much or what, but it's like it wouldn't even be comparable to today's schedule.
I can't remember off the top of my head. What did RFK Jr. do before politics stuff?
He was a lawyer. He's
a lawyer. Okay.
He took the family's the family's traditional job, and he was an environmental lawyer.
And
so
anti-pharmaceutical, but for the most part, it was largely environmental stuff that he was focused on. There's a couple comments here.
By the way, as Trump says, loving that Bobby, but he doesn't like oil. Stay away from the oil, Bobby. Drill, baby, drill.
But I see we got some comments here from Flat Plain Jane, who I think is new. So nice to see you here. She says, all the vaccines have had complications, especially since 1986, when Ronald Reagan signed away our right to sue pharma companies if they are injured or die. And that's right. I mean, we have to remove that because why should they have any kind of protection when something could harm an individual and, someone is taking that product because they are under the assumption that it's going to prevent disease, not cause disease. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a major problem and people should be able to sue.
Yeah, and it's also not a black and white issue. So, obviously the media and these assholes on the Senate want a dichotomy. Either you're an idiot like Elizabeth Warren and vaccines don't cause any damage and they're all great and just trust the science.
Yeah.
Or you're against all vaccines. It's like, oh, wait, there couldn't be a big gray area in the middle that all reasonable people are in. Like, hey, you all of a sudden have this shot that just came out of nowhere that's going to treat this disease, this respiratory disease. And oh, by the way, it's not a vaccine, but you're going to change the definition of vaccine and tell everyone to get it, and it can't stop, or you can't spread it after getting it, right? Like, it's a reasonable person would say, nah, I'm kind of against that. I don't think so, right? That's a fair position to have. It's also fair to be against the Hep B one, right? You can have these positions. I think most people are going to see the efficacy of some of the vaccines out there, and some are going to be like, some of them are really bad. But it's not that dichotomy they want. It's a ridiculous dichotomy, and it just shows, as we were making the point, these guys are just a bunch of frauds. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, who also happen to be getting the most funding from special interests in the healthcare industry.
I saw something like over $700,000, nearing to $1 million. So, yeah, I mean, why would we think that she's just coming up with genuine thoughts and opinions? No, she's saying what she's paid to say.
Right.
I'm still. I think that when it comes to RFK Jr., I'm still very much of the opinion that we should be listening to, at the very least, people who are like in medical fields, right? Like, what was the girl's name you said? Was it Elizabeth Warren, or am I pulling that out of her?
Elizabeth Warren.
Like, who cares what she says about it? She's a politician, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, the only reason she's mentioned is because she's a senator, a part of the confirmation hearing.
Well, but you got to also be cautious about what you're saying, because you could say just go to the people in the medical field. Well, what does that mean? Do you go with the consensus? So is the consensus always right? Well, clearly they're not always right, right?
Well, when you
the
say
consensus
clearly,
at one point thought the Earth was flat.
Well,
wait a
like
second. What am I saying?
Yeah.
Okay, but the other thing is, or do you trust the institutions? And you can see how corrupted the institutions became under COVID, especially when you got a bozo like Anthony Fauci in charge. So in that case, it's like everyone plays into this. It's InfoWars. The thing that I found so interesting during COVID is, obviously, I don't have a medical degree. I actually have a degree in understanding politics. Really was what it came down to, but I don't have a medical degree. So it's like, but I was more right about this stuff than the vast majority of the medical field. They got it wrong. People I know who are doctors wearing masks outdoors. Like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't make sense, and there's actually a psychological reason they're doing it. There's a psychological reason why you still today, and I saw this coming back from lunch, people are wearing masks in cars. There's a psychological thing. My mom sings in a choral choir down in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I went to her concert in November, and I think I counted 3, maybe 4 people in the choir wearing masks, cloth masks. like singing. I can't imagine singing in a choir with a mask on. And it was like 45 minutes they were singing. Like, that's just ridiculous.
It's doable. I would say what you were talking about before, consensus or going with the institution. I think that consensus is the safest way that you can do it. Because if you have, let's say, 1,000 doctors who have studied stuff long enough and they're like, hey, this is the right idea, and you go into that and there's like 8 or something that are like, I disagree, then you should look at the 8, but then hopefully there's like talking about it and being like, well, why am I getting different answers? Why am I doing this? And then they battle it out and then they figure out what's up. Yeah. That would be, I would think, the smartest way to be able to go about getting answers for basically any scientific question.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Marty 1967 says, the problem is they are not trustworthy, Dawson, and that's kind of what I would say too. But Bill Dangsman has a really important comment here, unrelated subject. He says, the Republicans in the Minnesota House are trying to convince their members to accept a power-sharing agreement with the Democrats. The Republicans are in the majority. So if that is true, that Lisa Kamala Demuth is trying to force a power-sharing agreement that is going to be liberal, that is going to grow government, that is going to screw over the Republicans, then she absolutely needs to be taken as the leader. The Republicans cannot accept any kind of agreement when they are in the majority. They should be retaking the House, not accepting some power-sharing agreement.
Well, he said the Republicans in Minnesota House are trying to convenience their members to accept the power sharing agreement.
Uh-oh.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I figured it was convinced.
And who's Bill Dingsfin? Why are we reading his comments? This is our trustworthy source, Bill Dingsfin.
What was said about the doctors not being, or like, they're not trustworthy. That's why you have so many, is that you can try to nullify the untrustworthiness as much as you possibly can.
But Dawson, and there's this really interesting meme. I think Mort just shared it the other day. Well, you know, you laugh, but memes sometimes are great ways to make points.
That explains a lot.
What?
Do you points from memes? Well, can I see it? Where was
it?
I don't know.
Pull up Eric Mortensen's Twitter account. Napkin Nate says peer review, but we also know that
for us.
Napkin Nate says peer review, but we also know peer review can be a corrupted system because what was that guy's name? There you go, right there.
Oh, this is the That's
right?
the point.
Because it's very hard to do that, and it's very courageous. But sometimes you need to do that.
I mean, if this
and that's tough. But it's because you see things a different way. Let me give you
Hold on. If this person is saying the Earth is flat, then it's like this meme is really funny the other way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow, he's that stupid.
I mean, you also could be the nutball, right?
Yeah.
I wish it was so simple. I wish we could just conclude that the person standing in the middle there is always wrong, and in some cases, yes,
the majority always concluded to the truth, but that's not.
But there's so many examples where that's not the case. In fact, I would argue that certainly in 2016, but I think it happened again in 2024, that the people in the middle were the people saying Trump's going to win. Certainly in 2016, people said he's not going to win. They laughed. There's a nice reel of people going, Donald Trump will never be president. They laughed at it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, some of us saw it coming. I predicted before that election Trump was going to win for the same reasons Michael Moore predicted it too, by the way. So sometimes the small minority sees something that the vast majority doesn't see. Well, it would be nice to just assume that majority always is the wiser. It's just not the case. Here's another great case in point. There's a principle in investments, you know, my history is in investment advising, that the majority usually gets it wrong.
All of the things that you've cited aren't science, though. That's where I'm getting caught up, is because if you have scientists who are like, the answer is like definitional, like there is like X equals 3 or whatever, there is an answer to it. And if most of the scientists are like, yeah, the answer is 3, and then one scientist comes out and is like, actually, I'm getting -2. It's like, okay, so
Okay, so what's the scientific process, Dawson? Can you explain it?
No, can you?
Yes, please. And the reason it's called a process is it's constant, or it's constantly.
Are you talking about the scientific process or the scientific method?
Either one, same thing. Scientific method.
Well, okay, so
do you know what that is?
It's a scientific method. I haven't studied it since high school.
Right. You propose a hypothesis and people review it, and you basically come up with a consensus, but that doesn't mean the consensus is correct because new information could be provided. So one good case in point is the consensus in Egyptology is that the Sphinx is dated to, what is it, was the original thinking 3,000 to 5,000 years or something like that. But then geologists found water erosion in the Sphinx, and because of that area, there wouldn't have been heavy rain. Sorry, can't speak right now. There wouldn't have been heavy rain falling in that area for the last 11,000 years, basically before that ice age, or coming out of that ice age. So that suggests that the Sphinx is much older, right? So the consensus had it. And by the way, and they're still fighting against this information, because then you get human beings and you get egos involved, and then the sciences get corrupted, like Egyptology. But there is a valid complaint or assertion that the consensus is wrong with new evidence. And so in the case of science, there's never really much of a conclusion.
And sometimes there isn't even the consensus. It's just there's an illusion of consensus because that's where all the money is. You know, you look at the World Health Organization, for example. You look at all of them who have come together to have the exact same opinions when it comes to COVID. It's just because that's where all the money is coming from, and it appears as some unified front, when in reality, if you talk to plenty of the medical professionals on the ground, they've all got individual opinions for themselves, and they don't have these World Health Organizations speaking for them.
But in a case like that,
let me expand on that real quick.
But in a case like that, so say there's 25,000 World Health Organization paid scientists, like the odds of all of them being like, yes, we have reached the same consensus, is crazy. If you would assume all of these are like good scientists or like people who care about the science. Every single one of those is like, well, I'm getting paid by this guy, so I'm going to do whatever they tell me.
Well, that actually makes a lot of sense. That actually makes a ton of sense to me. There's two actually problems that could exist here. One could be a educational issue. So they were wrongly educated, or they weren't equipped with the right tools to come up with the right answer.
25,000 of them?
Correct. Yeah, it could be the institutions of education that did wrong. I lack a great analogy to try to drive home this point, but you could certainly fail on the education.
There could be someone who has a degree in feminism. Does that mean that they have the most knowledge and history of feminism? Probably not.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a little bit better example of that, but something that's like close, but you're missing a key ingredient. I mean, this is pretty common, like
engineering.
Like you might have a biology degree, but you don't have a degree or a practice in virology. So, like, you're missing key ingredients to draw the right conclusion.
Well, sure, but then that's
I'm searching for an analogy. Here's the one that I could actually say I'm an expert on because I am studied in politics. Is that the corrupting forces of power and money? And so, if you just want to exclude the fact that people have egos, are motivated by money, are motivated by blackmail, are motivated by power, right? Like, these are real things that human beings, I mean, it's so obvious to us. It goes to the beginning times and stories. It's in the Bible. It's in your Torah. We understand these are corrupting forces. And to act like scientists aren't going to be corrupted by that is crazy. And I think you're seeing it. You saw it during COVID, but you're seeing it during this climate scam. Like this idea that they all have the consensus that the Earth is warming, and we need to invest heavily, trillions of dollars into a new energy system. It's like, well, how do you ignore the fact, especially when some of your leaders like Al Gore are on the side of benefiting financially from this stuff? Mm-hmm. So it's like, it has to be
John
viewed
Kerry,
in that way.
who
John Kerry,
and all these people fly on commercial or private jets to get to Davos, and so I mean, they don't even believe what they're proclaiming.
Well, just because
Dreamkick Assistant says Uncharted X on YouTube for Egyptian history, minority viewpoint truce. I like that. Yeah, I think that's an interesting area. You know, I wish I had more time to look into it.
That idea, like the Obama has lakefront property or beachfront property. People who claim to care about climate change are flying on private jets and stuff like that.
Right,
I
that
mean,
elitists don't actually care.
Elitists, well, we know that elitists don't care, but they're not, like, they're the ones that are benefiting from it. But I'm more so focused on, again, the scientists specifically. I would hope that an environmentalist or a scientist who's studying deforestation doesn't also make money from logging and deforestation. Like,
well, there's a lot of cases where I'm not maybe that specifically, but a lot of cases where that is happening.
Where the
and that's actually happening at some of the highest institutions, where to the point where like Fauci was getting cutbacks from vaccines, right? So it's like. And even if it's not happening currently, the fact that there's a revolving door with the FDA and pharmaceutical companies. By the way, it's not the only industry, right? The Defense Department and military contractors, the U.S. Treasury and Goldman Sachs. These are all problems, right? So, look.
I think that
President Obama did not become president as a wealthy man. He makes millions of dollars giving speeches. Like they sell out. They basically are rewarded, like in that case, on the back end. So you can't ignore these corrupting forces. It's just human
I have no
psychology.
I have no doubt that some of them are, but again, that's why you have so many. Then you're like, the odds of all of these people being corrupted is lower than if it was one guy saying this is what it is.
Do you not concede that there are points where a majority of any kind of geographical area or organization can be corrupted or be wrong? Can you concede that?
That a lot of people in a place can be wrong?
Yeah. That like a vast majority?
I mean, sure, that's happened through all of history. Again,
right. So you understand this is a thing, right?
That, well, being wrong versus being corrupted is different. Scientists way back when.
Well, you could believe that they could be corrupted too, right?
Not. I think that the odds of a group of 50,000 people being corrupted in the same way to give the same answer or whatever is way lower.
Do you think most people?
Well, no, it's not. It's not even just about money too. It's like about the fear of losing your license. There's all kinds of things that I mean, look at what they did to Scott Jensen. Not that Scott Jensen's number one guy on all this, but on COVID he was very solid, and so you're under the threat of the government if you were to speak out against this. If you were a medical professional, all these medical professionals were forced to get a vaccine, even though they're perfectly capable of determining for themselves if they want to be injecting that into their arm. So the government inserted themselves and any of these policies that are going to be resulting out of this so-called science will come from politicians. So the politicians and the government, ultimately, at the end of the day, are the ones who are going to implement this against we the people.
I agree. I do think that the government, when it comes to mingling together government and science, that's where you get so many problems, because then you have all the vested interests. You have all of the people saying like, oh, well, I could make money if I vote for this or don't vote for this. Like that all sucks. But I have a lot of trust when it comes to the greater majority of medical
But
professionals.
you act as if these things can never be separated. Even if you took Congress out of the equation, there's going to be funding for the sciences, and there's a hierarchical system to the sciences, and the people on the top are going to choose who gets funding, and that's going to be political. So it's like you're actually basically creating some kind of nirvana that will never exist.
Here we got a $5 rumble in from Brad Ganser. He says, 51 of the smartest minds in the intelligence field believe that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation.
Dare I say, may have been corrupted on that one.
Yeah. And, it'd be interesting. It would be interesting to know, of these 51 intelligence officials, how many of them actually believed in their heart of hearts that it was Russian disinformation, and how many of them were just saying what they thought they had.
Well, one thing we can say with certainty
Biden
is 51 of those individuals do not have a security clearance anymore.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Trump.
So this
I'm already forgetting all the wins by Trump. That was a great one.
This is a big reason why when I watched to bring it all back, the what's his name?
Frank,
RFK Jr.
Tom. Who?
RFK Jr. His opinion on vaccinations and stuff like that, I just don't give a lot of credence. Have you seen the clip Joe Rogan and Bill Burr where Joe Rogan's like, so what do you think about the masks or the vaccines? I can't remember which one.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Burr's like, I'm not going to talk about it with you. I'm not going to sit here with no medical degree and you sit over there with no medical degree smoking a cigar behind a big American flag and talk about healthcare or whatever. And I'm like, yeah,
That's Bill Burr right there.
I'm kind of right there too. It's like I barely think that my opinion counts. The only the only parts of my opinion that I think that counts is ones that I'm getting from like my doctor.
Yes, but
doctor.
you know, in the end of the day, Dawson, you could also be getting the opinions from the consensus or from the experts that are completely wrong, and it's without doubt, as Pierre Morgan is willing to admit that they were wrong. I would dare say they lied, but they were wrong about that you can't spread the disease if you get vaccinated.
The odds of the entire medical field being wrong or being corrupted or being wrong about a certain issue are way lower than.
But they got it all wrong during COVID. They got it almost all wrong.
No, you're making a good point, and that's the tricky part, because you're right. The odds are in favor of them getting it correct, unless there's some major issue like institutional education that they're being educated improperly. But you know, you're right, and that's what we have to contend with. But
that's why to me,
I don't know how else to explain it. Let me just leave one example with you. You know, my last job in the military was at a division headquarters. You know, as a junior officer, a captain at division headquarters, which is really interesting. And so I get to see a 2-star general think and how he navigates key decisions. And at a division headquarters, a 2-star commander has a large staff, over 100 people. Now, most of those people are in staff with a colonel as a head. So at any given time, the commander is probably going to only have a dozen or a couple dozen people in the room, all being birded colonels, or lieutenant colonels and stuff like that. But you're going to have a lot of people making decisions. In the end of the day, the whole room can think one way, but the commander's decision is what goes. And sometimes you'll find out that the division commander's correct, even though the whole staff didn't see it, because he's a 2-star general. He's been in longer. He's been in command. He sees and feels things that other people haven't seen. And it really matters in this regard, because in combat or in war, that actually might mean people die if he's wrong.
I agree with you.
And so it's a really interesting thing that a room full of smart people could possibly see something different than one guy. But in this case, the Army, and the Army is just one example of many, but one guy could actually make a better decision. Of course, in the corporate world, CEOs can outrule, you know, a bunch of other people
I agree
too.
with you. And so that's why when there's a medical field of a bunch of medical personnel who have studied this for like 30, 40 years and know all this stuff, say you should give your babies the vaccination card or like all the vaccinations on the list when they're born, versus RFK Jr. with, as far as I know, 0 medical training that's professional in any way or you know, studied under medical field stuff. I'm gonna lean towards the medical field when it comes.
You know, I would generally agree with you, and that's where my position was until I realized doctors don't even read this stuff.
And that's
the sad part.
I think that the worst part of COVID was the mistakes that like the CDC made, that
Correct.
the medical field made.
Yes.
Because now,
Oh
all
my
of
God,
that
we
trust
totally
that
agree.
people had is gone. Now it's like,
Yes.
oh well, they're not right on.
And not just the CDC, Dawson, your regular doctor. I have a friend who is very, you know, not actually in the medical field, but went to his doctor, and the guy goes, "Are you going to get your COVID vaccine?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Well, why not?" The doctor asked, "Why not?" And he listed all the reasons. And he's like, the doctor didn't even, he just said you should get the vaccine. He didn't even study. He never looked at the, whatchamacallit, I was going to say prospectus, but that's a investment term. But the
Adverse reactions.
Yeah, but there's a document that comes with these things. I can't remember what they call it.
Well, yeah, and that's like improper work, right? If you have a bad doctor.
I think, I'm not an expert on this. You know, Mark, we could probably ask this to. I think the vast majority of doctors don't read that.
Right, and I think that
people are lazier than we think.
Yeah, I think that that's a fault on the doctors too, because they should be keeping up with everything. But
Right.
having a
Right.
story of a bad doctor does not mean that the medical field as a whole knows.
No, my point is that I think the majority of doctors don't do this.
I mean, we can't know, obviously, but
Well, we could ask Mark because he's got some insight being in the healthcare industry.
they should have some kind of constant, ongoing. Well, I don't know if they have ongoing education things for doctors specifically, but they should. I figure that
They
doctors
definitely
are
do.
always keeping up on
And
this.
by the way, a lot of times they're hosted by pharmaceutical companies. And they get lunches and steak dinners with pharmaceutical reps. The corruption's so obvious, right? But you could also look at it as, well, maybe the pharmaceutical companies are offering something that's really good for their patients. So it's not like it's all bad. It's not really black and white there. Not all pharmaceutical products are terrible. If you get a headache, it's probably not bad that Bayer exists and makes aspirin, right? So it's not a black and white issue. But it's problematic that Pfizer will lie about testing a product they launch out there in the marketplace. And oh, by the way, they just happen to have a practice where they advertise on every major news network, and not because they actually think people are going to take their products, so that they don't get bad stories written about them, which has been leaked by people that have been in the pharmaceutical industry and the marketing, saying that's what they're doing. That's why they buy up those ads, because those ads are like all the side effects, and it's like, why would anyone take that drug? It's like they're not doing these advertisements to take drugs. They're doing it so that the company won't say bad things and do bad reports about them. That's why at Truth Hurts, like, we have to heavily vet who we would ever let advertise on our show, right? Because it would be like, if Pfizer came and knocked on a door, and let's just say they said, we'll advertise on the Truth Hurts for $1 million, I would be useless if I took that, because I've compromised myself on discussing it,
Well, should pharmaceutical companies be publicized? Should they be public companies? Or
sure, why not?
How do you,
yeah.
Like, so by the government? What they do?
Oh, when you say a public company, when you say that to a guy in investments, you're saying a publicly traded company.
I guess
you're talking about owned by the
big
government.
But even if you have the publicly traded company, they're going to be the investors are going to be saying, you need to do what makes us the most money, and then they're going to have to do what makes them the most money.
Well,
How do
yeah,
we solve
but
this issue?
that's not like a ultimate, like you can't make money at the behest of like an unethical practice, and that actually would be argued as you're not being you're actually forcing probably the closure of your business because you're going to be found liable or something like that. So just to say that you're maximizing profit for investors doesn't mean you can do anything. That's a bad idea. All right, I want to shut this down. We got to get ready for Mark's show here. A good conversation. Appreciate all the comments here. Sorry we don't read every comment, but we had a lot of Rumble rants, so thank you guys all for the Rumble rants. Thank you to our great sponsors today, including Alpine Cabtree in St. Cloud, Minnesota, Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're buying a home or selling a home, give Warren a call at 612-419-7453. And also brought to you by John Galt Mortgage Company. Go to johngaltmortgage.com. No post show today. I guess we're having trouble with locals, so we'll be back. I think Tuesday we're going to have the J6er, but he's out of town, so hopefully we can get him on. Want to give you a little Minnesota flavor of what someone had to deal with. And quite frankly, I'll just be honest with you. If the Republicans aren't going to stand up, I'm done talking about the Capitol. What are we just going to keep saying the same thing every day? Mm-hmm. Democrats got to show up. Sorry, you lost interest. You lost. You're letting the Democrats run the show. It's ridiculous. Thank you very much, Tucker, for the great show. Oh, Marty says,